We will now remove the 2 bolts holding the caliper bracket in place, starting with the bottom bolt. Both of these require a 14mm socket. See what was causing all of that ruckus. There are 4 bolts holding the hub to the carrier, and in order to access them you have to go through these holes. The bolts are on pretty tight, so you'll want to use a breaker bar of some sort to loosen them up. You will need a 14mm socket. You have to loosen the bolts all of the way in order to get the hub off. After all of the bolts are loose, the wheel hub assembly should come right out. This is a good sign something was wrong. This large O-ring came with the wheel hub assembly. It goes around the axle carrier. Be sure to compare your replacement parts and make sure they match the old ones. Now it's time to put this thing back together. Start by hand threading the bolts back into place. It can be a little difficult to get the bolts in there correctly. You'll want to torque these bolts down to 59 foot-pounds. I just tightened them down with my breaker bar. Now see if you did a good job. Compare old and new. If you're not replacing your rotor at this time, just use your old one and be sure to spray it down with brake clean. Now that the rotor is on, we can begin to put the caliper and bracket back into place. Remember, the caliper pivots up on the bracket. You can remove the caliper off of the bracket by gently pulling it apart. Bolt down the caliper bracket over the rotor using the 2 bolts we previously removed. Torque these bolts down to 34 foot-pounds. I simply tighten them with a large ratchet. Now that our caliper bracket is securely in place, we can insert our brake pads. Mine were still in good condition, so I'm using my old ones. If you have new brake pads, you'd want to insert them now. Unhook the caliper and gently slide it over the brake pads. If you're putting on new pads, you may have to compress the caliper piston with the C-clamp. If you have some brake lube on hand, feel free to lube up the caliper sliding pin. Torque it down to 14 foot-pounds. Don't forget about the brake hose. Get the wheel back on and hand tighten the lug nuts in a star or crisscross pattern. Let's get our jack stand out of the way and gently lower the vehicle. Torque the wheel lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Or use a breaker bar.